So, got to make sure that Dr. Christopher, right?
Yes.
And what's the last name?
Keener.
Oh yes, that's right. Keener.
K-E-E. I didn't give you a card, did I?
No, you did. It's just that
I did? Okay.
yes. And so, can I address you as a business consultant for Southeast Asia?
For Asia Pacific,
Oh, Asia
Japan,
Pacific.
APJ.
Okay, Asia Pacific, Japan.
Yep.
So later on, you could address to the audience the website or thinking that they could get in touch with you. And so Asia Pacific and Japan, based in Japan. Okay. And okay. So the questions I'm going to be asking you will be primarily about the overview in Japan and about the tax regime, and also doing business in Japan and how companies, will have to face the common challenges, and also how they can partner with you, of course, in Japan itself. And also, I'd like to ask if you could explain a little bit of what's happening politically in Japan. Is that fine with you?
Sure.
So, if you're ready,
All right.
just look at the camera for a few seconds, and after that, I'll turn to you and then just talk. Hi, welcome to the National Critics' Choice online news save Hyatt for the Hyatt hotels around the world. I'm Robin Stienberg, and I have a great guest here from Japan. His name is Dr. Christopher Keener, who is based in Japan and a consultant for businesses who are wanting to explore opportunities in doing business in Japan itself. Dr. Keener, thank you for joining us here at the National Critics' Choice. Tell me, how can businesses understand what's going on in Japan today?
I think people need to go over and check it out themselves, get on the ground. I know it's an expensive place. During the 27 years I've been there, the dollar has dropped to a third of its value. So, and it was expensive when I got there. So, but I would urge people to go over and meet people. If you have a product that you think would be well received in the Japanese marketplace, you really need to go over there and meet people who are doing things in your field and see what other products are over there. Go to a trade show, see the booths of other companies, either Japanese companies or foreign companies that are already in that marketplace. You really need to get an early start. It's a market that takes a long time to develop. It's a strategic market because the partners that you can form in Japan will be helpful to you, not only in the Japanese market, which is a very sizable market in itself, but also to other world markets. So it's not a place to take lightly. In terms of, it's going to cost you a lot, so you really need to think carefully about how you can make this investment. But I would urge people to begin that journey as soon as possible, not to put it off, because the longer you wait, the early bird will get the worm. And Japanese wake up early. I know you Singaporeans like late mornings. If we're up for a few hours beforehand, we might have already captured the opportunity. So an early start is very important in Japan, and people take longer perspectives on relationships. So it's not really how much money can I make today off of this transaction, but it's a longer term perspective on, okay, if we have some small transactions which really may not be very consequential in terms of, is this enough for me to live on right now? No. But we're really thinking about something in the distance, which may be a shared goal, strategic goal for you, strategic goal for me, a win-win situation. Maybe we have different goals, but we try to find a place where we can come together and both reap a nice reward for doing good work together. And I think that's the perspective you really need to come to Japan with, not the kind of, can I save you 10 cents on this? Of course, there is that kind of perspective of how can we, and especially these days, cost is a much more important factor than it ever has been in Japan. And I think that's part of the wonderful opportunity that we have now in the 21st century, because 20 years ago when I was first in Japan, Japanese are not interested in value. They're interested in quality. So now there's a kind of a little disconnect, and that is they want quality at a value price. And so they want the world price. They don't want to pay the uplift that they have been paying traditionally, and be happily willing to pay, twice, 3 times as much as the world price, because they want a better product. They want better support. They want hand-holding. And they still want all of that, but they want a better price. So there's something that has to give, usually. And it's like, well, if you really want that wonderful support, we're not going to be able to give you the price you're seeing in other places. And, I think there's some give and take there. But there certainly is a lot more opportunity now for foreign companies to sell products which may not hitherto have been considered in Japan because they don't meet the quality standards. Because people now are thinking that they do want a cheaper product, and they're willing to start thinking about where can we make sacrifices in quality, or where can we say, okay, well, how could we work with you to increase the quality level a little bit there so that we can make it suitable for this market. And then the other thing after this, the triple disaster is that, for example, with foodstuffs, up until now, there's been a very serious locavore movement in Japan. There still is. So local foods are prized over foreign imported foods, whether it's beef or vegetables or what it is. Some of that has changed since the earthquake and with the radiation concerns, where people are reevaluating that they're not throwing out Japanese goods and saying Japanese is bad, it's dangerous, I'm gonna die of cancer or something. They're not necessarily saying that, but they're beginning to value the fact that these foreign goods may not be as, there's danger everywhere in the world, and there's potential for contamination of some kind in any kind of product. And I think that this creates new opportunities for things that they wouldn't have considered before as things that they would want to consume or import.
Now, what kind of tax regimes does Japan impose on businesses, especially if it's a foreign business in Japan? Is there any requirement that Japan requires a local partnership as well?
Well, local partnership is probably the most prevalent way of doing business in Japan, but it's certainly not the only way. You can set up a direct sales, your own. You do have to have an entity in Japan. You can't do a point of sale transaction in Japan without an entity. But that entity could be 100% yours. It doesn't have to have local ownership involved in it. And the tax regime is light as far as I see comparatively to other countries. There are very serious reporting requirements, but I think you'll find that the tax burden of bringing a product into Japan, unless it's in a highly protected industry, like, say, for example, automotive, an industry which is hard to get in without that partner, who knows how to get through the regulations. But if it's not a protected industry like automotive in Japan, which we all know Japanese automobiles are some of the best in the world, so that makes sense that it might be a little hard to come in as a foreign company. But certainly, for example, in IT-related businesses, which I've been involved in for a long time, there are really no restrictions whatsoever, that kind of technology. I would think you'll see the same thing with biomedical type markets, products as well, that there really aren't that many technical restrictions, tax or import duty kind of framework.
What kind of challenges do you think companies will face, especially if they are a foreign company, face in Japan? Is there any common challenges?
Common challenges. Well, yes. I would say that patience is, a very important word in Japan. Not thinking that you're going to, for example, one common thing that people say is that they sit down and they meet with somebody, and the other person says yes. They think they had an agreement, but yes doesn't mean yes in the American English sense. Yes means I understand what you said.
Even for a modern Japanese.
So yes does not mean what it does for Americans who think of yes and no. It's a very black and white kind of thing. I've been in relationships where you negotiate an agreement, sign it, drink the beer, the kanpais and everything, and then the contract's all signed and everything, and we're starting up. They throw the contract away.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, the contract was done, but we don't live by the contract necessarily. So,
So they don't believe in living by the contract.
well, it's a more organic concept of a relationship. So that's the base. That is a foundation, and they're not going to really throw it out as if they're going to stamp on it or something like that. They're totally going to disregard it. No, but I would say that it's subject to very broad interpretation, broader than, say, an American. An American perspective would be is if you need to do something differently than is stated in the contract, you really need to go back and renegotiate it. But I think that that's not necessarily the Japanese prefer shorter contracts that are subject to much more open,
Flexible.
yes. And if you write a 20, 30-page contract, they're apt to do things that a little differently than you had written in it, and they're not going to question all the little details necessarily. So it's more important that you're really trying to form a relationship of trust, and that takes time, and that's not going to be done in the first few months or year or anything. That's something, so you start out doing small things together, you develop trust, you make a little money together, and then if that all goes well and you have good alignment and the goals are in good alignment, things have not changed very much, then I think that really grows in mushrooms. It turns into a very nice plant, tree that you both really feel is a strength of your business.
Amazing. And Dr. Keener is a consultant and a business advisor in Japan. And please do look up on his LinkedIn, and you can find more of his bio information. To continue, what are the potential reforms in terms of taxes in Japan? Will there be more changes coming up in the next 10 years? Do you see that change?
Well, the big question right now in our minds is whether TPP is going to be accepted by that the Japanese Prime Minister is going to really accomplish having it ratified, and then too is whether the Japanese people will accept that, because of course there is a very serious contingent of businesses in Japan that's very interested in the TPP free trade zone, of which Singapore is of course a founding member. And if that were to happen, I think it would create a very favorable situation for countries like Singapore and Japan to collaborate in this kind of umbrella organization that the U.S. is trying to launch this team. But I do have serious concerns about whether the other side of Japan, well, it's not like it's sides or anything, but maybe it's a more rural contingent or an agricultural contingent, has very serious and valid concerns about TPP and what it's going to do to their livelihood and the local economies of Japan. So I think without some sort of domestic power sharing relationship, some kind of negotiation between the business side and, say, the agricultural side. That's a simplification of what's going on. But without some sort of give and take between them, so that, okay, well, it's going to hurt you on this side, but we're going to take care of you by doing this for you. Without that happening on the domestic side, I think it's going to be very difficult for Japan to enter the TPP. But that may actually, in the months and years ahead, that sort of an arrangement may actually take place. So I think that's something we'll have to sort of watch. And I don't think it's going to be this simple thing where this summer, in 1 or 2 months, we're going to know the answer about whether Japan is on board with the TPP. I think that it's, we may see like, oh, they're not on board right now. But that may not mean that they're not going to come to the table eventually. I think that Japan has too much to lose to not join the free trade arrangements. These are sort of super free trade zones that the U.S. and others are proposing at this point in time. But I think they can't afford to not join some of these relationships in a limited form, at least.
And speaking about relationships, what essential tips for doing business in Japan could you give for companies that are looking forward to?
Looking to the Japanese market.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, we talked about patience. We talked about starting early. We talked about strategy, thinking of it as a strategic challenge, kind of like a game of chess rather than a game of checkers. You want to think 10 moves ahead, maybe? 12 moves ahead? So, if you're really only thinking about the present move, that's not enough. And because it's a very expensive place, you really need to think about how you're going to accomplish that investment into this market. That's not to say you need to really throw a lot of money at the beginning. I think in the beginning, because the return on the investment is going to be logarithmic. So you're really going to see, no matter how much money you put in the beginning, it's very unlikely you're going to see, just an incredible increase in the beginning. You're really more likely to see this kind of a curve where, I don't know, 1, 2, 3 years, you're not going to see enough to really cover what you're putting in. But hopefully in a 10-year time frame or something like that. Time frame's different for products, but I've seen very few. Of course, there are the Apple computers of Japan, where they came into the market and they did, ballbuster returns in the first year. But those kind of companies, what I've seen generally is you can count the number of companies like that on the back of your hand, and oftentimes those companies fall out of the groove within a year or two. So they really don't know why they were successful. And then they spend 10 years trying to figure out how to get back into the track again. And so the return on investment is the same, really. In fact, I really think the logarithmic return is the better one, because you can bank on this kind of a curve, and it's not going to drop off precipitously.
Last, before we let you go, understanding Japanese, how could you give 3 tips about understanding the Japanese culture in doing business? Because most people don't understand the Japanese culture too well, and it's still a mystery today. So, Dr. Kino, could you give us some insights on that?
Well, Singapore to me, for example, you have a focus on qualifications as being very important, say educational credentials, and I think there's a very similar sensibility in Japan. So that's a very good starting point because Japanese evaluate their counterparts by their educational background, their organizational affiliations, their friends. So that's a very important starting point in terms of trying to find a partner who's on your level in your corresponding level in society or business. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go for the highest, the best. Largest multinational Keiretsu company, if you're not necessarily that company. Although in many cases I have helped small, medium enterprises to partner with very large Japanese industrial groups. But you don't need to necessarily, depending on your market, be with the name brand companies that we all know from Japan. You may want to be with a smaller company that's more specialized in technology that you have or the products that you have. That they have certain expertise, they have certain distribution channels, things that can add value to the operation for you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Dr. Kino, could you also give some of your expert opinion about what's happening politically in Japan? What is Japan going through the next 5 to 10 years from now? What do you see?
Well, I think the real question is whether the present Prime Minister, Prime Minister Noda, may actually be sort of a turning point for Japan, or whether we need another person to come in, and that's going to. I think at some point you're going to see a Prime Minister emerge and a regime re-emerge that brings together a consortium of people in a new framework that will really bring Japan to the next level out of its, you've seen 10, 15 years of sort of slow decline in Japan, not really any noticeable growth. And I think we're at the tip of seeing some of the seeds for the next era of growth in Japan. And whether that is Prime Minister Noda, who is a very interesting person, very interesting character, or whether that's somebody. Some people have said of the latest set of prime ministers that they are like tissue paper, because we just throw them out and we're on to the next one. And I think we have this expression in Japanese, "mottai nai." It means what a waste. Because there are a lot of people who come in and try to solve. One of the problems that the current prime minister is struggling with is the consumption tax and increasing the consumption tax. And it's almost as if he has to take the hit to get the consumption tax passed. He has to quit that. He can't get anything else accomplished because that's the biggest thing. But the present prime minister is really trying to accomplish a few things, including TPP and Social Security reforms, which are really important to the future of Japan. As I think Singapore shares the same problem. We have an aging workforce. So how do we take care of a population where it's sort of top-heavy with older people who need to be taken care of after they have worked for many decades?
So how is Japan able to take care of the aging workforce? Because what I hear, and forgive me, is it true that Japan is facing a problem in trying to establish incentives for this population?
There's truth to that, but Japan is not alone. Certainly in East Asia, you see similar issues in Korea, even China. I think I read an article this morning that really predicts that the markets in terms of having large young workforces in Asia are really India, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines. So I would expect that in the next 10 years, you're going to see pretty massive migration of people from Japan, people and companies, you're going to see lots more Japanese manufacturing in Southeast Asia.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. And with that, you're going to see Japanese workforce, although that is a very small proportion of the local workforces. You're going to really see lots of local people who are involved in those businesses. And these made in Japan stickers really won't be on the back of our loved Japanese electronic devices. You're really going to see the full gambit, really probably of made in some other country with a Panasonic, Sony, whatever sticker on it.
Dr. Kino, could you tell us how our viewers could contact you for more information and seek your consultancy in Japan?
Well, I'm on Twitter. I have a website for my company, Kamo Inc., KAMOINC.com. And yes, you can find me on LinkedIn and generally accessible on the web.
Well, Dr. Kino, thank you for joining us here at the National Critics' Choice Save Hyatt. And viewers, thank you for joining us here at the National Critics' Choice Save Hyatt for the Hyatt hotels around the world. I'm Robin Steinberg. Thank you, Dr. Kino.
Thank you.
I hope you enjoyed it.